I wager everything I have.
I only bet on what's dearest to a man's heart. Else there's no way to tell if he's bluffing. What a man is willing to risk, or not to risk, that's a measure of his soul.
Try it again. One more time. I'll say one more time right away.
I think it's important to create the same kind of fun and environment that you had in the first movie. And since we created these wonderful pirates that turned into skeletons in the moonlight because they were cursed, we had to find something else to replace that.
Davy Jones is wounded so deeply. He's famous in mythology for having torn out his own heart in an effort to never feel that way again.
100 years before the mast. Will ye serve?
I will serve.
Davy Jones is this marvelous character that was created by Gore and Ted and Terry and animated with the geniuses up at Industrial Light and Magic.
We made the decision on this film to cast actors to play the parts, and they're in the shots playing the characters, and we're going to put our CG versions over the top of them.
Liar!
Bill Nye makes him a real character, and yet you really can't see the real actor. So that's a very difficult thing to do, and when you see Davy Jones, you'll realize how brilliant he pulls this off.
Jack Sparrow.
When Bill Nighy was cast, we wanted to incorporate his face into it. So we ended up mimicking a lot of the signature features in his face. Very high cheekbones, sort of elongated, chiseled jaw, but then the jaw has to kind of flourish out into this mass of tentacles.
So we started breaking apart how we were going to come up with translating from the artwork to a three-dimensional model. So we start with scanning the actors, and that's a process where you're collecting three-dimensional information.
They put you on the platform and you can see your body forming on the computer screen, so you're now cyber scanned. So they then have what they call all of your information. They have all of your data.
Nice. Made it. Excellent.
And from there, it branches out into a lot of different departments.
Our job is to give it the textural quality. So in looking for Davy Jones' skin, one of the other painters was getting coffee, threw his coffee cup away, looked in the trash can, and there was a coffee-stained styrofoam cup. And he just thought it looked interesting, so he took it, scanned it in the flatbed scanner, brought it into Photoshop. I saw him using it, and I said, "Hey, Ron, what's that? It looks great." And he's like, "Oh, it's a dirty coffee cup." And so I brought that in. What we're looking at here is the actual result of scanning a chunk of that dirty coffee cup. And you can see if I turn the layer on and off, it takes what's kind of a milky, not too defined image and turns it into more of an interesting pattern. All that work with the coffee-stained styrofoam cup gets applied right here on the face of Davy Jones, right here.
This is all part of the pre-production, and then eventually you're getting into shots.
Background action and action!
Then you were a poor captain, but a captain nonetheless.
Have you not introduced yourself all these years as Captain Jack Sparrow?
If you start with a really good cast actor like Bill Nighy, he owns that performance.
You can condemn an innocent man, a friend, to a lifetime of servitude in your name while you roam free.
Yep, I'm good with it. Shall we seal it in blood? I mean, ink.
My working costume is a deeply attractive grey tracksuit.
Poor Bill is hopping around with a load of dots all over him, which I'm sure wasn't how Gore sold it to him in the first place when he said, "Hey, who doesn't want to be a pirate?" Pirates are really cool, and you've got to wear that, and that's really not cool.
The process of motion capture is not new. It's been around for a while. What's different on this show is in the past you will have shot a clean plate with nobody in it, and then later in a very controlled environment you would shoot the performance. And you have 16 cameras, and the cameras pick up the action. Well, that's very scientific, and it takes a lot of the spontaneity out of the process.
Now, I want you to do, move your shoulders around as much as you can move them, wherever you can move your arms.
So what we've done is we've created a new technology that we've coined image-based motion capture, or iMoCap. From a single two-dimensional image, we're able to extract that actor's full 3D performance, turn it into animation, put it in the creature, and put it right back into that same shot.
With new technology, we're capturing the performance in the plate. Gore is able to direct the actors, move the camera, all in the way that you would if you were shooting a real live action sequence.
Because you do this, but then this is sort of stuck out there, and it seems like there's enough.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Let's put a couple in.
Gore was very concerned about the eyes and making sure the eyes looked really good. As a backup plan, we decided that if we put makeup around Bill's eyes, we would always have the option of, if we get into a tight close-up and the eyes just, there's something that doesn't quite look real about them, that we could always split in his real eyes in those cases. I'm happy to say that we've never had to resort to that.
It's your bed, Captain. Four.
Everybody thought Davy would be this big, serious, ominous sort of character, and Bill's kind of made him really funny and unique and odd.
Your son was fortunate enough to find a ship, and yet not so fortunate as to find land.
He does a lot of very interesting, quirky things in the movie.
Price.
And they're the kinds of things that if what amounts to a committee is working on that later, that somebody would object to it. Because it's a communication between Gore and Bill on set and they work this out, I think we get a higher level of performance that doesn't get sort of discussed to death.
He's like literally the man of 1,000 faces. Like every shot, we're discovering some new facial expression, and we have to make new controls to get that expression.
And we're recreating the entire facial performance with almost 700 shapes. Anything from raising the cheeks to blinking the eyes to moving a small portion of the lip.
It can only be a woman.
He would probably be uncomfortable to know how closely studied his face has been by a whole group of people here at ILM.
You go frame by frame, watching the performance, listening to the dialogue over and over.
It can only be a woman. 3 trees.
And then the other part of it is we're trying to translate all of that onto a character that has an octopus on his face.
One of the first areas of concern was how are we going to deal with the beard of tentacles?
We knew we couldn't hand animate those because there's about 40 tentacles on his beard and he's in hundreds of shots. Would have just taken way too long to do it manually.
But they need to have their own animation. They're not just hanging there, they're all kind of writhing and moving. They have to respond to his motion so that when he moves, that they follow the motion. They have to collide against each other so they don't pass through each other. But they also can't be friction-free. They need to be kind of sticky. So one of the analogies we were using was imagine a piece of wet spaghetti against a leather jacket. You know, that they're not just free to slide. So that as he moves, you know, they cling and will sort of peel off more slowly. We have this sense of stiction. They also have to be able to be directable. So at times we want to be able to do keyframe animation, like when he holds up the key. So it's sort of a tricky mix to kind of get all those different aspects of the motion to play nicely with each other.
The experience of acting, the same things are required of you, generally speaking. This is slightly different, given the fact that I'm, playing a man who has a beard that can play the organ, which I must admit so far has been outside of my experience.
And what we've asked Bill to do here is a very difficult thing because he doesn't have the makeup appliances on to let him really see what the character's going to be. He's got to hold that all in his head.
He's so fantastic in how he moves, and he was really feeling it more than I think a lot of actors would. Essentially, we start out with Bill Nighy's performance here, and he sort of mimics like he's moving his chin around and dragging it back and forth along the keyboard. And they actually had somebody on set that actually could play the organ as well. And so we could use this as reference. It starts out like this with just them all stuck to his chest. We did them sort of like the fingers of a hand. So we had 5 tentacles on each side sort of playing the major notes and the major beats. And then we had the extra ones to sort of do some flourishes and make it feel more octopus-like.
When they were filming the organ sequence, Bill Nighy had this prop tentacles, which Orlando can interact with. The two of them worked together to stage this elaborate performance where Orlando picked up the tentacles with one hand and then transferred them to another and then used a pencil in his mouth finally to get the key. It's a real challenge for our animators to basically match the performance of the tentacles to what Orlando was doing.
Right now we're doing scoring, we're doing our visual effects, we're doing our mix, we're doing our color timing at night. The entire post schedule is kind of stacked vertically. There's really no time. Normally we would, we'd love to fly up to ILM and kind of do this in person. But this is the next best thing. So we have these transmissions scheduled, usually once a day.
Okay, so this is pretty close. I think we've made a lot of improvements to it. Some of the last work that's being done is better shadow.
Is it going soft before the rack to Orlando, or is that correct?
No, it's racking right at the rack, I think. Yeah, it's sort of racking at the same time his fingers are racking.
One of the challenges, or actually one of the better parts for me anyway, and the crew, the compositing group, was that Gore was a compositor. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge because we know that he's going to nail us on certain things, but at the same time, we like working for him.
Now this is super close here. We're just, last thing we're working on are kind of drips and splashes.
Interesting translucency on the uncircumcised unit here.
Yeah, I mean, this happens a lot in these sort of backlit situations. Is it too much?
My only question is, does it make him a little too fragile calamari?
That's coming from a separate pass, so we have control over them.
Let's just knock it back 50%. That translucency right in there. So that we're looking at these eyes, which are really dark.
Yep, okay, no problem.
People are going to look at this character and think that's the most amazing makeup job ever done. But in fact, it's not makeup. It's a computer-generated character.
Ready? And action. Whoa. Action. Back away. And then Bill comes through. Crowd opens a little bit.
Damn you, Jack Sparrow!